My hand hovered over the polished brass doorknob of the guest suite. It was quiet, too quiet for the middle of the afternoon. I was supposed to be at a dress fitting, but the seamstress had canceled. I just wanted to surprise Mark. She's clueless, Mark, completely clueless. I froze. That voice wasn't Mark's. It was sharp, distinct, and dripping with mockery. It was Jessica, my stepsister. I know, Mark's voice replied, followed by a low laugh, but she's sweet. And once we get married next month, the inheritance is secure. Don't get too comfortable, Jessica purred. Plans change. Just make sure you know who the real winner is. My stomach turned to ice. I didn't think. I just shoved the door open. They scrambled apart. Jessica was sitting on the edge of the bed, her blouse unbuttoned at the top. Mark was standing over her, his hand resting familiarly on her shoulder. He jumped back as if he'd been burned. Elena, Mark stammered, his face draining of color. It's not what it looks like. Really? I choked out, stepping into the room. My legs felt weak. Because it looks like you're cheating on me with my stepsister 3 weeks before our wedding. Jessica didn't look scared. She just smoothed her skirt and smirked. Oh, stop being dramatic, Elena. We were just talking strategy. Strategy? I asked, looking between them. With your shirt open? You wouldn't understand, Jessica said, standing up. Now, if you'll excuse us, Mr. Henderson is waiting in the study. It's time to read Father's will. She brushed past me, smelling of Mark's cologne. I looked at Mark, waiting for him to apologize, to chase after me. Mark? I whispered. He refused to meet my eyes. We should go downstairs, Elena. Don't be late. He walked out, leaving me alone in the cold room. I wiped a tear from my cheek. It doesn't matter, I told myself. I have the inheritance. I can kick Jessica out. I can fix this. I was wrong. 20 minutes later, we sat in the dark oak study. Mr. Henderson, our family lawyer, sat behind the massive desk. He looked sweaty and nervous. Proceed, Mr. Henderson, Jessica commanded from the armchair. Yes, he cleared his throat. I, Arthur, leave the estate, the mansion, and the company shares to my daughter, Elena. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. However, Henderson said loudly, raising a hand. There is an addendum dated 2 weeks prior to his death. What addendum? I asked, gripping the arms of my chair. Father never told me about an addendum. It states, Henderson continued, avoiding my gaze, that in the event of Elena's mental instability, all assets and control of the estate shall transfer immediately to her stepsister, Jessica, until such time as Elena is deemed fit. Mental instability? I stood up, knocking my chair back. That's a lie. I'm perfectly sane. Sit down, Elena, Jessica said soothingly, though her eyes were cold. You've been so emotional lately. Father noticed. The grief, the stress, you've been hallucinating. I have not, I shouted. You forged this. Mr. Henderson, you know this is fake. The documents are in order, Miss Elena, Henderson mumbled, closing the folder. Effective immediately, Jessica is the sole owner of the estate. The room spun. I turned to Mark, who was sitting quietly in the corner. Mark, tell them, I pleaded. Tell them I'm fine. You know me better than anyone. Mark stood up slowly. He looked at me, then he looked at Jessica. Jessica patted the empty space on the armrest of her chair. Mark walked past me. He didn't stop until he was standing next to Jessica. Mark? I breathed, my heart shuddering. I'm sorry, Elena, Mark said, his voice void of emotion. But Jessica is right. You've been erratic. Maybe this is for the best. You're choosing her? I asked, my voice trembling. Because of the money? I have a reputation to maintain, Elena, Mark said, finally looking at me with pity. I can't marry someone with nothing. Jessica stood up and clapped her hands. Well, that's settled. Security. 2 burly guards I didn't recognize stepped into the room. Since you're unstable, Jessica said with a cruel smile, I can't have you in the house. You might hurt yourself. Or me. You can't do this, I said, backing away as the guards approached. This is my home. Not anymore, Jessica replied. She pointed to a suitcase sitting by the door. My suitcase. She'd already packed it. Get out. One of the guards grabbed my arm. I tried to shake him off, but he was too strong. I looked at Mark one last time. He was looking down at his shoes, checking his watch. They dragged me to the front door and shoved me out. I stumbled down the stone steps, my suitcase tumbling after me, landing in the dirt. The heavy wooden door slammed shut with a final echoing boom. I stood there in the driveway, the cold wind biting through my thin dress. I had no home. I had no fiancé. I had no family. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase, my knuckles turning white. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I looked up at the window where Jessica was watching me, laughing. Enjoy it while you can, Jessica, I thought, a fire igniting in my chest. Because I'm coming back. $300. That was the sum total of my life as I sat on a damp bench in the park, clutching my suitcase. It wasn't enough for rent, but it was enough for revenge. I looked at the crumpled business magazine I pulled from a trash bin. On the cover was Sebastian Blackwood, Jessica's estranged older brother. The headline read, Blackwood's CEO faces board ultimatum. Settle down or step down. He hates his family. I whispered to myself, tracing his sharp jawline on the page. And he needs a wife. If I couldn't beat Jessica with money, I would beat her with rank. Sebastian was the head of the family. If I married him, I wouldn't just be Jessica's equal. I would be her superior. I spent every last cent on a second-hand emerald gown and a ticket to the charity gala where he was rumored to be tonight. 2 hours later, I walked into the glimmering ballroom of the Grand Hotel, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I scanned the room and saw him instantly. He stood near the balcony doors, radiating a cold aura that kept everyone else at bay. I took a deep breath and marched toward him. A sharp-suited man with glasses stepped into my path before I could get close. Mr. Blackwood is not accepting solicitations tonight, the assistant said smoothly, holding up a hand. I'm not a solicitor, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my knees. I'm his solution. Tell him I know about the board meeting on Friday. The assistant Kai, I assumed, narrowed his eyes. Excuse me? Let her through, Kai. The voice was deep and baritone, vibrating through the floorboards. Kai stepped aside instantly. Sebastian Blackwood turned to face me. He was taller than he looked in the photos, and his eyes were darker like endless tunnels. He swirled a glass of whiskey, looking at me with absolute indifference. You have 30 seconds, Sebastian said. Amuse me. You need a wife, I blurted out. The board thinks you're too volatile, too isolated. They gave you an ultimatum to marry by the end of the quarter or lose your CEO position. His grip on the glass tightened. You've been reading the tabloids. That's dangerous. It's true, isn't it? I stepped closer, entering his personal space. You don't want a real relationship. You want someone to stand next to you in photos, sign papers, and keep her mouth shut. And you are volunteering? He asked, a cruel smirk touching his lips. You look like you're about to faint. Who are you? I'm Elena, I said. And I don't faint. Elena, he tested the name. Why would a woman like you want to shackle herself to a monster, as the press calls me? Because your sister, Jessica, stole my inheritance and my fiancé, I said, the venom seeping into my voice. She kicked me out of my own house yesterday. I have nothing. Sebastian paused. The indifference in his eyes cracked, replaced by a flicker of interest. Jessica? You're the stepsister she always complained about. She thinks she owns the Blackwood mansion now, I said, clenching my fists. But she doesn't, you do. You're the head of the house. I haven't stepped foot in that house in 10 years, he said dismissively. I hate it. Exactly, I countered. You need a wife to secure your company. I need a husband to get back into that house. I don't want your money. I don't want your love. I just want your name. Kai cleared his throat softly. Sir, the board members are watching from the bar. They're looking for a scandal. Sebastian glanced over my shoulder, then back at me. He looked me up and down, analyzing me not as a woman, but as a potential asset. A marriage of convenience, he mused. You realize if you sign a contract with me, there is no going back. I am not a kind man, Elena. I don't need kindness, I said, meeting his gaze head on. I need power. Sebastian set his glass down on the railing. Kai, bring the car around. Take her to the office. Sir? Kai asked, surprised. Sebastian looked at me, a dangerous glint in his eye. She wants a deal. Let's see if she has the stomach to sign it. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, so I hid them under the cold, polished surface of the mahogany conference table. Sebastian sat opposite me, reading a file Kai had just handed him. The only sound in the massive office was the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock and the scratching of Sebastian's pen. Your father was a decent man, Sebastian said without looking up. Weak, but decent. He wasn't weak, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. He was manipulated. By my sister, Sebastian finished. He finally looked up, closing the folder. Jessica has been trying to get her claws into the main estate for years. I find it amusing that she used a mental health clause to steal it from you. It's creative. It's criminal, I corrected him. And I intend to take it back. I know, Sebastian leaned back, tenting his fingers. He wasn't laughing at me. He was analyzing me, his dark eyes stripping away my defenses. You have fire, Elena. I didn't expect that from a charity case. I'm not a charity case, I said, sitting straighter. I'm a business partner. Do we have a deal? We might, he said coolly, but I have conditions. 3 of them. Name them, I said. He held up a finger. First, residence. If we marry, we live in the Blackwood mansion. I blinked. I thought you hated that place. You haven't been there in a decade. I loathe it, Sebastian replied smoothly. Which is why I need you there. I intend to reclaim the house to assert dominance over the board, but I have no desire to deal with the day-to-day operations or the people inside it. That will be your job. You will be the lady of the house. You will deal with Jessica. You will deal with the staff. I just want a bed to sleep in. I can handle Jessica, I said, feeling a surge of anticipation. The thought of walking back in as the owner was intoxicating. Second, he continued, you handle my domestic affairs. Social events, family dinners, press inquiries regarding our personal life. You are the shield between me and the world. Fine, I said quickly. And the third? Sebastian's expression hardened. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Third, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. There will be no love in this marriage, no sentiment. No trying to fix me. We are partners, nothing more. Do not expect affection, Elena. I am incapable of it. I looked at him, handsome, powerful, and utterly broken inside. A week ago, that statement might have hurt. Today, it was a relief. I just watched the man I loved for 3 years cheat on me with my stepsister, I said, my voice flat. I'm not looking for romance, Sebastian. I'm looking for a weapon. Sebastian's lip quirked upward. A flicker of genuine interest lit his eyes. Good answer. He slid a heavy document across the table. Sign. I picked up the pen. The ink was black, permanent. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name in a sweeping arc. Elena Blackwood. Done, I said, capping the pen. Kai, Sebastian called out. Kai stepped forward from the shadows, placing 2 items on the table in front of me. A heavy black credit card made of metal and a set of vintage iron keys. The card has no limit, Kai stated professionally. And these are the master keys to the Blackwood mansion. I picked up the keys. The metal was cold against my palm, but it made me feel warm inside. The car is waiting downstairs, Sebastian said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Go buy some clothes that fit your new station. We move in tonight. Tonight? I asked, standing up to meet him. Why wait? Sebastian smirked, a dangerous look that promised chaos. Jessica is probably having dinner right now. I think we should join her. I clutched the keys tighter. I wasn't the broke orphan girl anymore. I was Mrs. Blackwood and I was going home to war. The sleek black limousine crunched over the gravel driveway, the sound echoing like a drum roll. Through the tinted window, I saw the staff peering out from the side entrance. They looked terrified. They had probably spent the last 2 days walking on eggshells around Jessica. The driver, a stoic man named Arthur, opened my door. We have arrived, Mrs. Blackwood, he said, his voice respectful. Thank you, Arthur, I replied. I stepped out. My old canvas sneakers were gone, replaced by Italian leather stilettos that clicked sharply against the pavement. I wore a tailored white coat that cost more than my car used to. I took a deep breath of the crisp evening air. It smelled like victory. I walked up the massive stone steps. Before I could reach the handle, the double doors swung open. Mrs. Graves, the head housekeeper, stood in the doorway like a stone sentinel. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She had served my father for 20 years, but she had always been a stickler for whoever held the checkbook. Right now, she thought that was Jessica. Miss Elena, Mrs. Graves said, her voice stiff. She didn't step aside. You know you are not permitted on the premises. Miss Jessica gave strict orders. No visitors. Especially not you. I'm not a visitor, Mrs. Graves, I said, stopping on the top step so I was eye level with her. You have no business here, she insisted, crossing her arms over her black uniform. Please leave before I call security. I don't want to see you dragged out again. I'd like to see them try, I said calmly. Elena, please, she sighed, looking tired. Don't make a scene. Miss Jessica is currently in the solarium having tea. If she hears you, let her hear me, I interrupted. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document. Actually, Mrs. Graves, I have some reading material for you. I shoved the paper against her chest. She instinctively grabbed it. What is this? She asked, frowning. Read the second paragraph, I commanded. Out loud. Mrs. Graves adjusted her glasses. She squinted at the paper, her eyes widened. She looked at me, then back at the paper. This is a marriage certificate, she stammered. Sebastian Blackwood and Elena Blackwood? Keep reading, I said. The deed transfer, the Blackwood estate, she read, her voice shaking slightly, is hereby under the direct management of Sebastian Blackwood and his legal spouse. All prior claims by secondary beneficiaries are null and void. She lowered the paper, her face pale. You married Mr. Sebastian? Yesterday, I said, snatching the paper back. So, Mrs. Graves, who is the mistress of this house? You are, Mom, she whispered, stepping aside instantly. Good, I said, walking past her into the grand foyer. The marble floors gleamed under the chandelier. It felt different now. It didn't feel like my father's house or Jessica's prison. It felt like mine. Mrs. Graves, I called out, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. Yes, Mrs. Blackwood? She scurried after me, her attitude completely transformed. Where is Jessica sleeping? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She moved into the master suite, Mom, Mrs. Graves said nervously. The day you left, my blood boiled. The master suite was my father's room. It was sacred. Get the staff, I ordered, turning to face her. I want everything of hers out of that room. Clothes, makeup, perfumes, everything. Right now? Mrs. Graves asked, glancing toward the solarium. But she's resting. I don't care if she's sleeping, I said coldly. Pack it up and burn the sheets. I want new linen silk, the ones from the vault. I'm moving in tonight, of course, Mrs. Graves nodded rapidly. And where should we put Miss Jessica's belongings? I smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. Put them in the guest room, the small one in the attic. The one with the drafty window, Mrs. Graves blinked, then a tiny, almost invisible smile touched her lips. She had never really liked Jessica. Right away, Mrs. Blackwood. She clapped her hands, summoning two maids. You heard the madame. Upstairs now. I watched them scramble up the stairs. I stood alone in the center of the foyer, listening to the frantic footsteps above. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being pushed around. I was the one doing the pushing. And God, it felt good. The bass of the music vibrated through the floorboards of the master suite. Downstairs, my ex-fiancé and my wicked stepsister were celebrating their engagement in my childhood home. I stood in front of the full-length mirror. The dress Sebastian had sent over was a weapon made of red silk. It was backless, clinging to every curve with a slit that ran dangerously high up my thigh. Ready? I whispered to my reflection. Ready, I answered myself. I opened the door and walked to the top of the grand staircase. The noise below was deafening. Hundreds of guest people who had ignored me when I was kicked out were drinking my father's champagne. I took the first step. Click. I took the second. A hush started to spread through the room. It rippled outward from the bottom of the stairs until the jazz band faltered and stopped. All eyes turned upward. Jessica was standing by the champagne tower holding Mark's arm. She looked up, her smile freezing in place. What do you think you're doing? Jessica shrieked, her voice cutting through the silence. Security, who let her in? I didn't rush. I descended slowly, letting the red silk flow behind me like a trail of blood. No one let me in, Jessica, I said, my voice carrying over the crowd. I live here. You live on the street. Jessica laughed nervously, looking around at her guests. She's delusional. Mark, tell her to leave. Mark stepped forward, pulling his arm away from Jessica. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on the exposed skin of my back as I reached the bottom step. Elena? Mark breathed. You look incredible. Shut up, Mark, Jessica snapped, shoving him. She turned back to me, her face twisting with jealousy. You're crashing my party. Look at you. Did you spend your last $10 renting a dress to come beg for money? Beg? I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. I walked past her, brushing her shoulder with mine. I stepped onto the small platform where the band was set up and took the microphone from the stunned singer. Testing, I said. The speakers whined, "Put that down." Jessica marched toward the stage. "Get out of my house." "Actually," I said, gripping the mic stand. "That's what I wanted to talk about." "This isn't your house, Jessica." "Father left it to me," she screamed. "He left the estate to you," I corrected, enjoying the panic in her eyes. "But the deed to the Blackwood mansion has always belonged to the head of the family." "That's Sebastian," Jessica scoffed. "And he's a recluse. He hates us. He's never coming back here." "Is he?" I smiled. "That's strange." "Because he gave me the keys this morning." A ripple of whispers broke out among the guests. "You're lying," Jessica hissed. "Why would my brother give you anything?" "Because," I said, raising my left hand. The massive diamond on my finger caught the chandelier light, sending prisms dancing across the room. "He's not just your brother anymore, he's my husband." "What?" Mark dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, champagne splashing his shoes. "Married?" "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced. "I am Mrs. Sebastian Blackwood, the mistress of this house." "Bullshit." Jessica lunged for the stage. "You're a liar." The heavy double doors at the entrance slammed open with a thunderous boom. Silence fell instantly. Sebastian stood in the doorway. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than Mark's entire life. He scanned the room with bored predator eyes until they landed on me. He walked through the crowd. People parted like the Red Sea, terrified to touch him. He walked straight to the stage and stepped up beside me. "Sorry I'm late, darling," Sebastian said, his voice deep and smooth. "The traffic was murder." He placed a large, warm hand firmly on my bare waist, pulling me into his side. The heat of his touch branded me. "Sebastian?" Jessica whispered, all the color draining from her face. "You actually married her?" Sebastian looked at his sister with pure disdain. "I did." "And I believe my wife asked you a question." He looked down at me. "What was it, Elena?" "I was wondering," I said, looking at Mark, who was trembling. "Why there is a party in my house that I didn't authorize." "A valid question," Sebastian said. He turned to the crowd. "The party is over." "Get out!" Chaos erupted as guests scrambled for the doors. I looked at Mark. He looked at the ring on my finger, then at Jessica, then back at me with a look of pure regret. "Elena," he started, stepping over the broken glass. "That's Mrs. Blackwood to you." Sebastian cut in, tightening his grip on my waist. I smiled at Mark. "You heard my husband." "Goodbye, Mark." Power didn't just feel good. It felt intoxicating. The morning sun streamed through the high windows of the dining room, illuminating the spread of pastries, fruit, and coffee that Mrs. Graves had prepared. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, my father's seat. It felt cold but commanding. The double doors swung open. Jessica walked in, wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk robe. Mark trailed behind her, looking disheveled and wearing the same clothes from the party. They headed straight for the buffet. "Mrs. Graves," I said, my voice cutting through the clinking of silverware. "Please remove the food." Mrs. Graves didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and picked up the silver platter of croissants. "Hey," Jessica snapped, lowering her sunglasses. "I was about to eat that." "I know," I said, taking a calm sip of my coffee. "But the kitchen is now closed to non-paying residents." Mark rubbed his face. "Elena, don't start this." "We're hungover." "That sounds like a personal problem," I replied. "Here are the new rules. Since Sebastian and I own the deed, this is no longer a free hotel. If you want to stay in the guest rooms in the attic, rent is $5,000 a month. Payable in advance." "You're insane," Jessica hissed, dropping her fork. "I'm not paying you a dime." "Then you can leave," I shrugged. "Oh, and the staff you hired? The ones who helped you snoop in my room? They're gone." "I fired them 10 minutes ago. Mrs. Graves has rehired the old staff you bullied into quitting." "You can't just fire my people," Jessica screamed. "I just did," I smiled, and I gave Mrs. Graves a raise. "Any other complaints?" Before she could answer, a shrill voice echoed from the foyer. "Where is she? Where is that ungrateful little brat?" Mark winced. "Mom?" Linda stormed into the dining room, clutching a designer handbag like a weapon. She was red-faced and furious. She marched right up to where I was sitting. You, Linda shouted, pointing a manicured finger in my face. You humiliated my son in front of the entire city. How dare you crash their party and make a scene? Linda, I said calmly, setting my cup down. Lower your voice. Don't tell me what to do, she screeched. You think because you married that monster Sebastian you're special. Mark is the prize here. You're just a gold digger who got lucky. I demand you apologize to him right now and give him a share of the estate money. A share? I laughed dryly. Mark isn't entitled to anything, and neither are you. I will ruin you socially. Linda threatened. I know everyone in this town. I know you do, I said, pulling a file from under my placemat. I also know you haven't paid your mortgage in 6 months. Linda froze. Her mouth hung open. Excuse me? I was reviewing the family investments this morning, I said, opening the folder. It turns out the bank was selling off some bad debt. I bought yours. Mark looked at his mother. Mom, is that true? It's a temporary cash flow issue. Linda stammered, her face turning pale. Well, I said, tapping the document. As the new holder of your debt, I can choose to be patient, or I can foreclose on your house by noon today. It's your choice. You wouldn't, Linda whispered, her aggression evaporating instantly. Try me, I said, leaning forward. Now, sit down and be quiet or get out of my house. Linda looked at the file, then at me. She swallowed hard, pulled out a chair, and sat down in terrified silence. I looked at Jessica and Mark. They were staring at me with wide eyes. So, I asked, picking up my coffee cup again. Who wants to discuss the rent payment plan? I needed fresh air. The air inside the mansion was still thick with the tension of my confrontation with Linda. I pushed open the French doors and stepped into the rose garden. Elena, I stopped. Mark was standing by the stone fountain. He was holding a bouquet of white lily, my favorite. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, his usual arrogance replaced by a look of carefully curated sorrow. What are you doing here, Mark? I asked, crossing my arms. I thought I told you to pay rent or leave. I needed to see you, he said, taking a step forward. He held out the flowers. These are for you. I know you love them. I drove to 3 different florists to find the fresh ones. I don't want them, I said coldly. Go give them to Jessica. I don't love Jessica. Mark burst out, his voice cracking. You know that. You have to know that. You have a funny way of showing it, I replied, watching him carefully. You proposed to her. You stood next to her while she threw me out. I was scared, Elena, he pleaded, closing the distance between us. You know how I grew up. I was terrified of being poor again. When Mr. Henderson read that, well, I panicked. I just wanted security. So you sold me for a safety net? I asked. I made a mistake, he whispered, standing right in front of me now. He smelled like the cologne I used to buy for him. I was weak. But seeing you last night, seeing you take charge like that, I realized what I lost. I want you back, Elena. We can figure this out. You and me. For a second, just a split second, my heart twisted. This was the man I had planned to marry. His blue eyes were swimming with tears. I remembered the nights we spent planning our future, the names we picked for our children. Mark, I started, my voice softening. We can still be together, he rushed on, encouraged. Sebastian doesn't love you, he's a monster, but we have history. If you just, his eyes flickered down. Just for a moment, but I saw it. He wasn't looking at my hand. He was looking at the 10-carat diamond ring Sebastian had placed there. His eyes widened with a greed he couldn't hide. The spell broke instantly. If I just what? I asked, my voice turning to ice. Give you access to my husband's accounts? Mark blinked, looking back up. What? No, you're not looking at me, Mark, I said. You're looking at the ring. That's not true. It is, I snapped. I grabbed the lily from his hand. Elena? He smiled, thinking he had won. I threw the bouquet into the mud at his feet. The white petals splattered with dirt. Those flowers are dead, I said, just like us. Don't ever approach me again. I turned on my heel and marched back toward the house, leaving him standing there with his mouth open. I stormed through the French doors and almost ran into a solid wall of chest. Sebastian, I gasped, stepping back. He was standing in the shadows of the hallway, looking out the window toward the garden. He had seen everything. Did he touch you? Sebastian asked. His voice was low, dangerous. No, I said, smoothing my dress. He just wanted to talk. He wanted to manipulate you, Sebastian corrected, finally looking down at me. His dark eyes were usually so cold, so guarded. But right now there was something else there, concern. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, but my hands were shaking. Sebastian reached out. I thought he was going to pull away, but he took my hand, the one with the ring, and squeezed it gently. You handled him well, he said softly. You're stronger than you think, Elena. He let go and walked past me toward his study, leaving a faint scent of sandalwood in the air. I touched the spot where his hand had been. My heart was pounding against my ribs. But this time it wasn't for the man in the garden. It was for the monster in the hallway. The clinking of silver forks against fine china was the only sound in the dining room. Sebastian had invited 3 potential investors from Tokyo to the mansion to prove that his domestic life was stable. I was playing the part of the perfect hostess, pouring vintage wine and smiling until my cheeks hurt. Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Tanaka said, nodding at me. This roast is exquisite. You have a lovely home. Thank you, Mr. Tanaka, I said, placing a hand on Sebastian's shoulder. We try our best to keep it peaceful. Bang! The heavy oak doors flew open, slamming against the walls. Jessica stood there, chest heaving, her hair wild. She was clutching a small velvet pouch. Stop, she screamed. Nobody leave this room. Sebastian sighed, setting down his wine glass. Jessica, we are in the middle of a business dinner. Leave. No. She marched to the table, her eyes darting frantically between the guests. Not until I exposed a criminal sitting right at this table. Criminal? Mr. Tanaka asked, looking uncomfortable. He exchanged glances with his colleagues. What are you talking about? I asked, stepping away from Sebastian. The Emerald of Siam, Jessica announced, holding up the pouch. It's gone. Stolen from the family's safe upstairs. That necklace is worth $2 million, Sebastian said calmly. Are you sure you didn't just misplace it? I didn't misplace it. Jessica pointed a shaking finger at me. She took it. The room went deadly silent. Excuse me? I laughed nervously. Jessica, that's ridiculous. Is it? She sneered, walking closer to the guests so they could hear her clearly. Everyone knows you're broke, Elena. Father cut you out of the will. You have nothing. You married my brother to get close to the money, and now you're stealing heirlooms to stash away for when he inevitably dumps you. That is a serious accusation, Mr. Tanaka murmured, frowning at me. I have proof, Jessica shouted. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a silk scarf, my scarf. Wrapped inside, it was the glittering green necklace. I found this, Jessica declared triumphantly, slamming it onto the table. Stuffed under the mattress in the master suite, wrapped in her scarf. The investors gasped. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a setup. A clumsy, desperate setup, but it looked bad. I didn't take that, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I haven't even been near the safe. Then explain why it was in your bed. Jessica yelled. You're a thief, Elena. A common thief. Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Tanaka said, standing up. I think we should leave. We cannot do business with a family involved in this. Panic clawed at my throat. If the investors walked, Sebastian's position as CEO would be threatened. I looked at Sebastian. He was sitting perfectly still, his face unreadable. Please, I pleaded silently. Don't let them believe her. Sebastian slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes were angry. They were waiting. He wasn't going to save me. He was waiting to see if I could save myself. Elena, Sebastian said, his voice level. Do you have anything to say? I looked at Jessica's smug face. She thought she had won. She thought I would cry, beg, or run away. I took a deep breath, pushing the panic down. I remembered the cameras I had installed with Kai. I remembered the power I held as the mistress of this house. I didn't need to defend myself against a liar. I needed to destroy her. I looked at Sebastian, then at the guests, and finally at Jessica. I stopped trembling. Actually, I said, my voice steady and cold. I have a lot to say, Jessica. You said you found this under my mattress? Yes. She hissed. I caught you red-handed. Interesting, I smiled, walking toward the head of the table. Because that mattress is memory foam. It sits on a solid platform base. There is no under the mattress. Jessica blinked. I meant inside the pillowcase. You just said the mattress, I countered. But let's ignore your slip-up. The real question is, why were you in my bedroom in the first place? Jessica stammered. Mr. Tanaka, please sit down, I said, gesturing to the chair. I think you'll want to see what happens next. I turned to Sebastian. Darling, call Kai. Tell him to bring a laptop. Sebastian's lips curved into a barely visible smile. With pleasure, Kai entered the dining room silently, a silver laptop tucked under his arm. He didn't look at the confused guests or the hysterical Jessica. He looked straight at me, waiting for the command. What is this? Jessica demanded, her voice shrill. Are we watching a movie? Is this another distraction? In a way, I said, smoothing the tablecloth. Kai, please connect to the main projection screen. Immediately, Mrs. Blackwood, Kai said. His fingers flew across the keyboard. This is ridiculous. Jessica turned to Mr. Tanaka. She's wasting your time. She's a thief trying to conjure up some digital trickery. If she is innocent, Mr. Tanaka said slowly, then we should let her prove it. The large screen at the end of the room flickered to life. It showed a grainy black and white view of the upstairs hallway. What is that? Jessica asked, squinting. That's outside my bedroom door. Actually, I corrected her. That is the hallway leading to the master suite. You see, Jessica, when I moved in, I didn't just change the sheets. I had Kai install a closed-circuit security system. Hidden cameras in every corridor. Jessica's face went from red to a ghostly white. You can't do that. That's an invasion of privacy. It's security, Sebastian interjected, his voice bored. Standard protocol for high-net-worth homes. Kai, I said. Timestamp 6:45 p.m., just before dinner started. Playing now, Kai announced. On the screen, the hallway was empty. Then a figure appeared. It was Jessica. She was wearing the same dress she had on now. In her hand, clear as day, was the green velvet pouch. She looked around nervously in the video, then slipped a spare key she must have stolen into the lock of the master suite. She disappeared inside. 2 minutes later, she came out empty-handed. The silence in the dining room was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. Well, Mr. Tanaka said, adjusting his glasses. That seems quite definitive. It's fake, Jessica screamed, backing away from the screen. It's a deep fake. She edited it. Technology can do anything these days. Jessica, I said, walking toward her. Stop. You planted that camera, she yelled, pointing at me. You set me up. I didn't make you walk into my room, I said calmly. And I didn't make you plant a $2 million necklace under my pillow to frame me for a felony. I turned to Sebastian. Darling, what is the penalty for theft and attempted fraud within the company bylaws? Sebastian stood up. He loomed over the table. Termination, he said simply. And regarding the house rules? I asked. Eviction, he answered. I turned back to Jessica. She was trembling, looking for an ally, but even the investors were looking at her with disgust. You heard the boss, I said softly. You have 24 hours to pack your bags and leave the premises. If you're not gone by sunset tomorrow, I'm handing that footage to the police. You can't kick me out. Jessica cried, tears streaming down her face, angry tears. This is my house, Sebastian, tell her. You can't let her do this to your own sister. Sebastian walked over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, presenting a united front. You ceased being my sister when you tried to destroy my wife, Sebastian said, his voice like ice. You have 24 hours. Don't make me call security. I hate you, Jessica screamed. I hate both of you. She turned and ran out of the room sobbing. The heavy door slammed shut behind her. I let out a breath, my shoulders relaxing. I looked at Kai. He gave me a small, respectful nod and shut the laptop. I apologize for the entertainment, I said, turning back to the guests with a steady smile. Now, Mr. Tanaka, shall we discuss the dessert course? Mr. Tanaka looked at me, then at Sebastian. A smile of respect formed on his face. Indeed, Mrs. Blackwood, he said, raising his glass. To strong partnerships, I clinked my glass against his. I had won the house. Jessica was done. But as I looked at the dark doorway she had fled through, I knew a cornered animal was always the most dangerous. The war wasn't over yet. The house was finally silent. The staff had cleaned up the shattered glass. The guests had driven away in their expensive cars. And Jessica was somewhere upstairs, angrily packing her bags. The war was won, but the adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, making sleep impossible. I wandered down the hallway and saw a sliver of light under the library door. I pushed it open. Sebastian was standing by the fireplace, staring into the dying embers. He had discarded his tuxedo jacket and unbuttoned his collar, looking less like a CEO and more like a man carrying the weight of the world. "You should be asleep," he said without turning around. "I could say the same to you," I replied, walking into the room. The air smelled of old paper and wood smoke. "It's past midnight. Sleep is for the innocent," he muttered, turning to face me. He held up a crystal decanter. "Bourbon?" "Please," I said, taking a seat on the leather sofa. He poured 2 glasses and handed me one. His fingers brushed mine, sending a jolt of electricity up my arm. He didn't pull away immediately. He sat down next to me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "You were ruthless tonight, Elena," he said, swirling his drink. I was impressed. "I learned from the best," I said, taking a sip. The liquid burned pleasantly. "I defended our home." "Our home," he repeated, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. He looked around the room with disdain. "I hate this house." "I always have." "Why?" I asked softly. "I know you're estranged, but you never told me why you left." Sebastian stared into his glass. For a long time, I thought he wouldn't answer. "Because this wasn't a home," he said, his voice low and rough. "It was a prison. My father, Jessica's father, he didn't want a son. He wanted a clone. When I didn't turn out like him, cold, greedy, obedient, he punished me." "Punished you?" I whispered. "He used to lock me in this library," Sebastian said, gesturing to the walls of books. "For days, no food, just water. He told me if I wanted to be smart, I should eat the books. Jessica was the golden child. I was the failure. The monster. My heart broke for the boy he used to be. I saw the cracks in his armor, the deep scars beneath the ice." "He was wrong," I said firmly. "You aren't a monster, Sebastian. You're a survivor. Just like me." He looked at me then, his dark eyes searching mine. The coldness was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability that took my breath away. "We are a pair of broken things, aren't we?" he murmured. "Maybe," I said. I reached out and covered his hand with mine. "But broken things can be rebuilt." He didn't pull away. Instead, he turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with mine. His grip was strong, possessive. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with business. "Elena," he whispered, his gaze dropping to my lips. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Sebastian," he leaned in. I closed my eyes, tilting my head back, waiting for the kiss that would change everything. I could feel his breath on my cheek, warm and inviting. Then he stopped. He pulled back sharply, letting go of my hand as if it burned him. "No," he said, standing up and walking to the window. His back was rigid. "Sebastian?" I asked, confused and hurt. "What is it?" "Rule number 3, he said, his voice cold again, though it sounded forced. "No love, no sentiment. We are business partners, Elena. Don't forget the contract." "The contract?" I stood up, frustration bubbling up. "Is that all this is to you? After everything we did today? After what you just told me?" "It's what keeps us safe," he said, refusing to look at me. "Go to bed, Elena." I looked at his broad shoulders, wanting to scream, wanting to shake him. But I knew him well enough to know the walls were back up. "Fine," I said, my voice trembling. "Good night, Sebastian." I walked out of the library, leaving him alone in the dark. I touched my lips, which still tingled from his nearness. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. He could hide behind his contract all he wanted. But as I climbed the stairs to the empty master suite, I knew the truth. I wasn't just playing the part of his wife anymore. I had fallen in love with him. And that was more dangerous than any scheme Jessica could ever invent. "Turn it off," Sebastian growled, his back turned to the massive television screen in his office. "I can't, sir," Kai said, his voice tight. "You need to hear this. The board is watching." On the screen, a news anchor was detailing the leak of the century documents. Supposedly from inside Blackwood Corp, showed millions of dollars being funneled into offshore accounts under Sebastian's name. "It's a lie," I said, pacing the room. "Jessica and Mark fabricated those documents. They're trying to crash the stock price so the board fires you." "It's working," Sebastian said, turning around. His eyes were red-rimmed. "The shareholders are panicking. I have an emergency meeting in 2 hours to discuss my resignation." "Don't resign," I said firmly. Kai, did you get what I asked for? Kai nodded, pulling a thick, dusty file from his briefcase. It wasn't easy. Mr. Henderson's secretary was cooperative after I offered to pay her student loans. These are the originals. I took the file. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. What is that? Sebastian asked. The nail in their coffin, I said. I need to make a call. I dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. Vivian Vance speaking. Vivian, it's Elena Blackwood. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. The woman of the hour, or should I say the wife of the embezzler. You know Sebastian is innocent, I said. And you know who is really behind this. How much do you hate Jessica? Enough to enjoy seeing her crash, Vivian drawled. She insulted my gala last year. Why? I have the proof to clear Sebastian and bury Jessica, I said. But I need a platform. The press is blocking our calls. I need you to get me into the press room at the Ritz immediately. And what do I get? Vivian asked. I don't work for free, darling. You get the exclusive interview afterwards, I promised. And Jessica's seat on the foundation board. Be there in 20 minutes, Vivian said and hung up. The flashbulbs were blinding as I stepped onto the podium. The reporters were shouting over each other, a pack of hungry wolves. Mrs. Blackwood? Is it true your husband stole $10 million? Is he fleeing the country? Where is the money, Elena? I tapped the microphone. The screech of feedback silenced the room. Vivian stood off to the side, arms crossed, smirking. My husband is not a thief, I announced clearly. He's a victim of corporate sabotage and fraud. We have the documents, a reporter yelled, waving a stack of papers. You have forgeries, I shouted back. Leaked by a desperate woman and a corrupt lawyer. I held up the dusty file Kai had given me. These are the certified bank records from the Blackwood estate. They show that the only money missing was transferred 3 days ago by Jessica Blackwood. The room erupted in gasps. Cameras zoomed in. And that's not all, I continued, pulling out a yellowed piece of paper. This is the original copy of my father's will. The one Mr. Henderson hid. I looked directly into the news camera. There was no mental health clause. Mr. Henderson and Jessica forged the amendment to steal my inheritance and defraud this company. We have the metadata proving the forgery was created on Jessica's laptop. Is this verified? A reporter asked, stunned. The police are verifying it right now, I said with a cold smile. I looked at Kai, who was standing by the exit with his phone pressed to his ear. He nodded at me. In fact, I said, leaning into the mic, I have just received word. Police have arrived at the Grand Hotel. Across town in a luxury suite paid for with stolen money, the doors splintered inward. Police, get on the ground. Jessica screamed, dropping her champagne glass. Mark scrambled backward over the sofa, looking for a back exit that didn't exist. Mr. Henderson froze, his face turning gray. I watched the live feed on Kai's phone as I walked off the stage. We got them, Kai said, a rare grin breaking his composure. It's over, I whispered, relief washing over me. Sebastian was waiting in the car. He looked at me as I slid into the seat, his eyes wide with awe. You saved me, he said. We saved us, I corrected him. Now take me home, husband. I'm exhausted. The afternoon sun warmed my face as I sat on the stone bench in the center of the rose garden. For the first time in 3 months, the Blackwood mansion didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home. Mrs. Blackwood? I turned around. Kai was standing on the patio holding a tablet. What is it, Kai? I asked, shielding my eyes from the sun. Don't tell me the board is panicking again. Not at all. Kai smiled, a rare expression for him. I just thought you'd like the update. The judge just passed the sentence. Jessica got 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. 5 years, I exhaled, feeling a heavy weight finally lift off my chest. And Mr. Henderson? Disbarred and facing 10, Kai replied. Oh, and I heard a rumor that Mark was fired from the car wash yesterday. Apparently he's not very good with sponges. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was a genuine happy sound. Karma took her time, but she arrived. Indeed, a deep voice said from behind Kai. Thank you. Kai, leave us. Sebastian stepped into the garden. He looked different these days. The dark circles under his eyes were gone, and the perpetual frown line between his brows had smoothed out. But today he looked nervous. He was clutching a thick document in his hand. Is that the quarterly report? I asked, patting the space next to me on the bench. No, Sebastian said. He didn't sit down. He stood in front of me, blocking the sun. It's our contract. My stomach dropped. The happiness I'd felt seconds ago evaporated. Oh, I said, my voice small. Right, the 3-month review clause. I forgot about that. We need to discuss the terms, Sebastian said, his face unreadable. Technically, the crisis is averted. The board is stable. My position is secure. You fulfilled your end of the bargain, Elena. I stood up, wrapping my arms around myself. So this is it? You're dissolving the partnership? I'm reviewing it, he said stiffly. He looked at the paper, then at me. Clause 3, no emotional attachment. No love. I know the rules, Sebastian, I whispered, fighting back tears. I had fallen in love with him, but I wasn't going to beg him to keep me. I had too much pride for that now. I can pack my bags by tonight. Is that what you want? He asked, stepping closer. No, I admitted, my voice cracking. But I won't stay where I'm not wanted. Sebastian looked at the document one last time. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, he tore it in half. I gasped. Sebastian, what are you doing? He didn't answer. He tore the halves into quarters, then into eighths, letting the confetti of paper rain down onto the grass. That contract is garbage, he said, his voice rough. It's a lie. It has been for weeks. I don't understand, I stammered. If there's no contract, then what are we? Sebastian took a deep breath. He looked at me with a vulnerability I had never seen before. Slowly, he lowered himself onto one knee in the dirt. My hands flew to my mouth. Sebastian? I don't want a business partner, Elena, he said, taking my hand. His grip was warm and shaking slightly. I don't want a fake wife to scare off the board. I want you. I want the woman who stormed into my office and demanded a kingdom. I want the woman who saved me from my own family. You ... You do? I asked, tears spilling over. I love you, Elena, he said, the words heavy with truth. I think I've loved you since you threw those flowers at Mark. Will you marry me? For real this time? No clauses, no expiration dates. Just us. I looked down at him, the monster who turned out to be a king. I looked at the house behind him, the empire we had conquered together. Yes, I choked out, dropping to my knees to hug him. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed me then, deep and passionate, right there in the garden. I had started this journey with nothing but a suitcase and a thirst for revenge. I wanted to hurt the people who betrayed me, and I did. But as Sebastian held me close, I realized the revenge was just the beginning. Jessica had the prison cell. Mark had the regret, but I had the crown. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged.